Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Brickyard. It's me, Janice Jolie, your curator for Asian Heritage Month 2023. Today, our guest is Cheng Thom. Welcome, Cheng.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
I was so excited you said yes, because I know you are a busy lady, you know? And
We're all busy under capitalism.
so true. And Cheng and I, we know each other from the Banff Center 2013, 10 years ago.
Yeah, wow, a whole decade.
For the
This
spoken
would be
word
close to
program.
our anniversary too, of meeting.
It's exactly our anniversary, I think, like 10
Oh
years.
my God, this is so
Wow.
special.
I remember in the first 5 minutes of chatting, it was like the wine and cheese meet and greet. We
Oh, I
just like
remember this
both
thing.
launched into talking about race and men. And I
Yeah,
remember like 5 minutes and it's like, okay, great, we're going to be friends. We're going to get along.
and we've been friends for 10 years.
Wow, amazing.
Mm.
So Kai Cheng, you are a multi-arts artist as well as a facilitator and you work in justice. Can you explain to our listeners kind of the breadth of the work that you do to introduce?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I do so many things, but they're all actually at their core the same thing. And I describe that thing in different ways over time. But what I'm going to say today is that I am a person who is really curious about discovering like the deep inner self of other human beings and facilitating or creating spaces where that deep inner self can come alive and rise to the surface. And that might be through art, like doing my own art or facilitating art workshops or education for others. It might be through the practice of one-on-one coaching. It might be through facilitating an educational group or doing conflict mediation. These are all aspects of the things that I do. Um, because I believe that that deep inner self, like the mysteries that lie at the core of the human being, are also like the keys and the maps to these like really big questions that we're all struggling with today, like how do we live in a collapsing world? How do we overthrow digital capitalism? How can we be with one another in community when we hurt and harm each other so much? The more we get to know what lies inside the human being, the greater our capacity to be with complexity and challenge. Um, and I just want to ask all the questions and learn all the answers.
I love that. I like that. What I hear so much from what you're saying is you have this deep curiosity to kind of figure out what is universal in the things that we're exploring. Like we're all in this, you know, climate apocalypse together, or,
Yeah.
as capitalism collapses around us. And so, yeah, an exploration of these ideas of the self. And so, when you are writing, and you also write many different kinds of forms, um,
Mm-hmm.
what is prompting you to write at all? Like, you
Oh,
inspired by something? You said you have questions.
yeah. I have questions. You know what comes to me is I don't know if folks who are listening have seen Walt Disney's original cartoon, The Little Mermaid. And there are many, many problems with The Little Mermaid and with Disney in general. But I grew up in the 90s and I grew up with Ariel the mermaid from The Little Mermaid. And there's just a moment when she's singing her sort of character defining song, part of that world, where she says, where she's singing about wanting to leave the sea and explore the human world. And she sings, I want to ask him my questions and get some answers. uh, and I just, as a child, I was like, me too, Ariel. I want to ask him my questions and get some answers. I want to leave the world I'm in and discover other ones and also come back to the world that I, grew up in. And there's a lot of feminist critiques that I think are valid of The Little Mermaid. But what I really love about that moment in that movie is that you hear the character say, I want to ask you my questions. And her voice actually changes in the song. Like it gets fierce and
Oh,
ferocious. That's how I feel like,
ooh.
you
So
know?
part of your world is your I want song for like
Yeah.
the world.
That is my I Want song. Exactly.
That's so great.
Yeah.
I mean, you have published books of poetry, you have written some children's books. as well as you write a column for Exclaim magazine.
Extra magazine.
Extra magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also create these kind of infographics,
Yes.
and little kind of short poem, like short pieces of writing that you post on social media.
Yeah.
Are these forms, what is the difference for you when you're writing in these different forms?
Yeah. Well, all of the writing comes from the same place. I think of the different forms as like tentacles of like the same beast, right? That's like trying
Love
to
that.
rise above the ocean and grab the ships,
And grab the ships,
Yeah, the
bring
ships.
them down.
Yeah, exactly. The ships of truth, right? And like bring them into the water.
Ooh.
And sometimes you just need a different size tentacle to grab a different size truth.
So
um,
true.
like in a more straightforward way, I guess I could say like no single form for me like can possibly hold like the completeness of what I am. I don't think a single form can hold the completeness of any artist, really. But some artists are very, able to like master themselves into a single form. And I've never had that discipline. I want to ask all the questions and try all the forms. And I've written poetry and novels and essays and prose poems. I'm always looking at like hybridity and like collection and connection. Um, and that's because each form has its own power, its own like lens, like on the truth. When I'm writing my advice column, which is like a very straightforward kind of writing, it's about answering on the literal level of truth. Like someone says, "Should I break up with my shitty boyfriend?" And I'm like, "Well, consider the factors, right?" And like go through that on a literal
So Bill
level.
Nye.
Exactly. Like
Consider this.
and that is one lens, but then there's another lens on the truth of the question, should I break up with my shitty boyfriend? We write a poem about it, and suddenly we're accessing a different part of the human being. And then just a note on those infographics for people who don't follow me on Instagram, which is the majority of the world. My infographics are like, they're these like sort of shapes that illustrate my take on different parts of like human experience or human psychology, right? So like there'll be like I'll do a lot of Venn diagrams, for example, illustrating the difference and the connection between gaslighting and disagreement, or like justice and revenge, right? Like those kinds of shapes. And I discovered infographics in 2020 when I first got Instagram, like because I was at home alone, like most of us during the first wave of COVID, and I was like, what am I gonna do? I guess I'll make infographics, put them on
Your
the internet.
your hobby became making infographics.
It did. It
I love that.
did.
Allow me to organize this information in a visual way so people can understand clearly and concisely.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's the power of infographic, is that it's very few words and just one image, and it illuminates something for people in a way that long form text or even like text by itself without image could not do. And I had never worked in a visual medium before because I just have never really explored fine arts, and my hand-eye coordination isn't the best. But of course, you don't need hand-eye coordination to make infographics on Canva. And so it was like this
Ooh.
huge like empowerment.
I want to speak, I want to ask you a little bit more about the different forms. So you say each form can kind of illuminate a truth in a new way. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're answering that, should I break up with my boyfriend question as a column, you're talking about kind of the literal truth, kind of the facts that you have in front of you, yes?
Exactly. Yes.
And so if you were to answer that question as a poem, you said it accesses a different kind of truth. What would a poem for you, if you're writing that poem, how would you go about it?
Oh yeah. Oh, you know how to ask a good question, Janice Jolie. um, for me, like the nonfiction format of an essay or advice column is about logic, facts, and you can hold a lot of nuance and emotion there. But you are measuring out like the surface level, and there's like a measurement that happens, like a really focused reasoning, which doesn't mean you can't have empathy. But with a poem, um, emotion comes first. soul comes first. And, writing an advice column is maybe answering for someone else, should they break up with their boyfriend or how should they break up with their boyfriend. But to me, if I were to write a poem, I'd be writing a poem about all the times I didn't break up with a boyfriend, even when reason said I should.
Oh. So then, oh, I love that, because then that creates a lot of kind of buildup and tension.
Yeah.
And it kind of becomes a bit of a list poem.
It does. It does. All
Mm.
the times that I didn't break up with that person or this person, all the signs that said I should, all the times I wish I'd listened, all the advice I didn't take.
So inevitably, this poem, it sounds like, is going to build up to, so this is the last, this is it. Something has to change. Something's got to give.
I think
I'm
so.
finally going to break up with this boyfriend.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. And it gets there in a really different way, right?
Mm. So cool. I like that you said that poems access an emotional truth. And
Mm-hmm.
even already, we're talking about the tentacles of an octopus trying to bring down the truth ship. You speak in metaphor,
Yeah.
just in your conversation. And I find that that's a condition of being a poet,
Oh,
is
totally.
that we see the world and explain our ideas through metaphor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, are there any, do you find you have recurring metaphors that you come back to again and again?
Oh, yes.
Tell us.
Uh, oh my God. Being interviewed by a poet about metaphor, my dream.
Mm.
Well, I think metaphor does something very similar to what infographics do. They use image or the implication of image to illuminate part of the human experience, a texture of the human experience that cannot be accessed through straight language alone, right? Metaphor is like queer language, maybe, and I speak in metaphor because I used to be a therapist and I'm a poet, right? And both metaphor has a powerful place in the role of healing and the role of art. And I guess I would just say, like, the metaphors I return to over and over again tend to be they tend to involve the ocean and fish. So here we are with tentacles. They
Aha.
tend to involve also fairy tale, journey, travel, the woods, wolves, wild animals, hunger, like carnivorousness. Yeah, there's a lot of metaphor in me about seeking the woods, like seeking another world and getting lost there, and like the things that we lose ourselves in the woods, we lose parts of ourselves in the woods. Um, we're looking for monsters in the woods, we become the monster in the woods, right? Like these are the metaphors like that tend to like haunt and live in my internal landscape.
Hmm. Do you think you could trace the lineage to why you find the forest to be otherworldly? You said you are interested in fairy tales a lot. Do you think
Oh
it
yeah,
comes from there?
totally. I mean, I was raised in the city in Vancouver and have lived most of my life in cities. So there's all just this like, very real fact that for me the woods is other and that I haven't
A
spent tons of
literal.
time there, literally, right?
Okay.
And then yeah, fairy tale is very psychologically concerned with like the hidden world or the other world. We have Little Red Riding Hood going into the woods. We have Little Mermaid going onto land. There are lots of stories about humans going into the ocean as well. Um, and I'm like a diasporic child, right? My parents and my family has been migrants for a really long time. I'm also a trans person, and I have literally crossed into different realm, like a different way of being with my gender. And it's like that exploring the unknown, both outside of ourselves and inside of ourselves. I think that makes this metaphor of the woods so resonant, like because there's like a wildness there and an organicness. Anything can happen. It's very dangerous, but also full of life.
So interesting. So interesting. I love the forest. I live by the Don Valley in
Oh
Toronto,
yeah.
in tkaronto, yes. And I go there maybe 2 to 3 times a week with my dog. And to me, the woods are like elders,
Yeah.
um, these trees have lived in the same spot their entire life, and it's a literal commitment to that spot, right? As local as possible. And the woods, I don't think for me, if it feels like the other or an escape. The woods feel like a return, like a returning to coming back to a home or the land as a home. And being in like a apartment building feels like I'm in some other place. But you know, Kai Cheng, my family name E Singhe, right? Janice Lee, it means people of the tree. So maybe it has something
Really?
to do with that. Yeah.
Oh my God. It's like an ancestral connection to the
Maybe.
trees and those elders. Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. You're reminding me as well. There's a moment in the movie Totoro, my friend Totoro, where one of the characters says, there was a time when humans and trees were friends.
Mm,
And I just
yeah.
love that so much. It sounds like you are friends with the
I think
tree.
so. Yeah. I'm here on Vancouver Island right now. And there are, as you're driving up the highways, you just see these trucks, these humongous truck beds with that entirely trees cut down,
Mm.
right? Entire trees cut down, and they're just stacked on top of each other like 20, like I don't know how, I can't measure, 20 feet maybe long. And to me, it's like these corpses of these living creatures that are just being, you know, paraded up and down these highways. And I think it's so brutal. And yet here I am using paper, right? So there's
Oh,
the
yeah.
complicity and all that, but it like breaks my heart when I see the clear cuts and that
Oh,
we
yeah.
have just normalized that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm always thinking about complicity these days. Like, yes, protect the land back, and then I'm driving a car, and
Mm-hmm.
that we're trapped in this system.
Yeah. We're trapped. And even despite our greatest efforts, our ethics and actions, I know you to be so involved in justice and liberation movements, but there's not a way for us to fully be free
Mm,
of being complicit.
mm. Let's, while we're talking about the system, we are living through a time right now where things politically seem to be getting worse, right? The
Yes.
hatred and the fear is coming up in a way, and then people who are driven by those things are really assertively and aggressively making policy changes, being very public and demonstrating their hate and fear. We're seeing so much of that oppression against trans folks, um,
Yes.
as we're still kind of we're still in this like Me Too movement of like all of the predators that are in every industry, because there are men in every industry, and sexism in every industry. And you are a visible, quite a public figure for as, private as you are with your work.
Mm-hmm.
How is that? I mean, what are the kind of barriers that are still coming up for you on an everyday basis as like an Asian trans femme poet?
Mm.
Just like a small little question.
And I was, oh no, this could launch a memoir. Well, I think I think you're right that it is getting worse. Part of what's so confusing for me, Janice, is like I think a feature of like the digital aspect of the capitalism we're living in is that that we're in a very fractured world. Like, you hop over into one part of social media and I'm surrounded by my comrades and leftists and like amazing artists. And then I go a little further, and then I'm like, whoa, oh my God, like leftist community can be super intense and trans misogynistic, right? Like,
Totally.
because kinfolk, not always skinfolk, not always kinfolk, like all these kinds of things, right?
Sure.
And then hop over to another part of the internet in just 1 second, and I'm surrounded by right-wing people or like trans exclusionary people, racist people. Like it's really astounding to me like how deep into the echo chambers all of us are or can be. um and so it's very difficult because to even make sense of what the challenges are, because on the one hand, being a public figure as a trans woman, to me, on the left, is like really about like there's a dehumanization through idolization that can happen, where people are like, oh, amazing trans women of color, they're so great, they're holding up the sky, except when we do something that they don't like, and then it's
Right.
call out culture town. But
Right. There's
then
like, you have to kind of be a perfect paragon of this
exactly,
activist trans woman. Yeah.
exactly,
No room for error.
zero. But
No room,
then
and so no room for kind of humanity. Like,
there's no room for humanity. No, I mean, this is my central complaint about
this is my
social
central
justice
complaint.
culture. No room for humanity,
Yes.
of lots of different, like, I've heard many of my Black woman friends say something quite similar, even if they're not trans,
Mm.
so there's a shared experience there. But it's like, we're this community, or like we're this political movement, and then we're embattled, because like even if we're harming each other outside the walls, right, there are these masses of folks who are aligned against us. So
Mm.
it's not like it's not like I could be like, oh, I'm going to leave the left and, you know, join the right. Like, that's not,
I'm gonna leave the left.
there's nowhere to
Right.
go. So that's a big challenge. Well, can I add one more thing though?
Of
I've been
course.
Because when you sent that particular question, it made me think of something. So you and I have known each other for 10 years, and
Mm.
we, in the first 5 minutes, started talking about race and men and sexism and all this kind of. It was amazing, and I remember thinking, to be fair, I think I was like 20, or
Yeah.
21, but like, and you were quite young too, but I was like, I remember having the attitude that I really like lived and fully knew what was meant by intersectionality, and like
Mm.
to be both trans and Asian. I thought I knew what that meant. And I did sort of, but it's been 10 years. And more than ever, I feel like the splitting of like, I have to choose to be vocal and trans and a public figure, or choose to be Asian and like racialized and like speaking about that, so many of the feminists of the 70s and 80s, the racialized feminists, I'm thinking about Audre Lorde in particular,
Mm.
were saying like felt like they had to choose between being queer or being racialized, or like, being a woman, right? Like, that these things had to be separate. And I thought, oh yeah, but we're living in intersectionality town now. Like,
Mm.
but to me, the splintering has only gotten worse, and I'm not sure what. Like, I noticed that I'm often involved in racial justice movements and education these days, and I often feel that there's no room, or not even any comprehension of my transness. And then in trans spaces, it remains like a heavily white dominated movement, in terms of
Right.
leadership.
Right.
And I never thought that 10 years into the future, when I was 20, that it would be worse than it was then. But it does, to me, feel like that splintering is much more enforced now than it was then. And that's just something I'm so confused about. And it's
Mm.
nice to be able to share it with you, because we've known each other that long.
Mm. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that's something I notice, I clock a lot, the division of our identities,
Mm,
right? When is it convenient to invite me because I'm Asian? When
mm,
is it convenient to invite me because I'm queer or a woman or etc.? And always early on, Kai Cheng, for me, I always tried to be all of myself all the time in every room that
yeah,
I
I
went into,
remember.
you
Yeah.
know? And that includes like my visible identities, but also my artistic identities. Like, I'm a singer-songwriter, I'm a composer, I'm also a spoken word poet and a clown. So in this set, I will be doing all of those things,
Yeah.
even if you were just expecting music. And I think that the categorization and the splintering of those things is because it's just capitalism, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
it's
Uh-huh.
easier for us to market you and manage you if you are one thing,
Right.
right? It's the same in music genres. Like, are you folk, or are you world, or are you
Mm,
jazz? So we can put you in a category and then market you to that category, and people can understand it. I feel it's just for like a simple understanding of ideas. You know, we just categorize things. And as the movement in the world, as we've been talking about, as things are, you know, getting worse, and we become more siloed into these identity groups, maybe maybe you're also feeling that within, you know, progressive movements where you're feeling you have to just be one identity. It's a hypothesis.
I love that. Yeah, I think the impact of capitalism and like the neoliberal aspect of like identity politics, like the part that is about marketing identity or like, you know, somehow pursuing social capital through identity is really key to this. Yeah. So thank you for that. That's actually really
Social
insightful.
capital through identity. Yeah. Because I don't know if you get this, Kai Cheng, but I've had white folks or straight white folks or men say things like, well, you know, you check all the boxes, so
Oh
obviously
my
you've
God.
been
It's like an
invited,
everyday.
right?
Yeah.
And so in that, your artistic excellence gets dismissed, or your any kind of cultural expertise that you have gets dismissed, and it's like, well, it's because you check these boxes, Asian, queer, femme, that you have been invited. And it's usually like an offhand joke, ha ha ha. I mean, it's racist and totally oppressive when people say that, but it's a real feeling that people have.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes.
I am losing opportunities because I'm not diverse.
This is the scarcity mindset. And,
Mm.
oh, yeah, I've had people say that to me all the time.
You know, maybe I'll turn it around and be like, have you tried queerness though?
Yeah, you could be
Tried
queer
it?
at any moment.
Maybe you need to open your experiences and maybe you need to experiment. Okay, let's move on. I want to ask you, okay, before I'm going to preface this with we invited you in Kitchener-Waterloo to come and
Yes.
feature at the Kitchener-Waterloo Poetry Slam. That was when I was helping to organize it. And I remember you performed at the Boathouse and you did this poem called No. And all it was you saying no for like 2 to 3 minutes, maybe. It was it was very theatrical. It was like, no, no. It was like sweet. And then it was like scared. And you went through this entire journey just saying no. And at some point you were on the floor and your like hair was everywhere. It was so moving because you're saying this word, but it's meaning 1,000 different things.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it was that same weekend you ran a workshop for us, and the activity that you did just as an intro was, I'm going to ask you, can I have it? And you're going to say no. And we did it for a minute, and we did it in pairs.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a lesson on consent and how does it feel to say no? Do you start to feel bad when you say no? All these things. And so to me, this is like politically, it's fascinating. But also from a poetic and like theatrical performance perspective, it's fascinating because the device of you saying no in so many different ways, that was the trick, that was the game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So this leads to my question as to, is there a piece you've written lately where you're really delighted with the game that you found in writing it? Like, was there a poetics that you're like, I love this, I'm having so much fun with it? Whether it's like a positive poem or a hard poem or...
Oh, thank you for remembering my no performance. I haven't done that in years because it's so intense.
It's very intense.
And yeah, the game. You know, so it's funny because the poem that came to mind that I've written recently is a letter to J.K. Rowling, actually.
Oh, the most famous trans exclusionary feminist in the world, maybe.
Yeah, the most famous trans exclusionary feminist in the world, the most powerful in many ways too.
Totally.
And it's even in my, you know, this poem is in my new book, which will be out August 1st. Pre-order now.
Yes, where do we pre-order?
From your favorite independent local bookstore. It's called, I'll show it to you even. It's called
A sneak peek at the cover.
Yeah, sneak peek. Falling
Oh,
back in love
yes.
with being human.
Yes. I've seen this cover. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so in love with this cover. And the book started with this letter to J.K. Rowling.
Mm.
It's like a litany. It's a love letter. It's a spoken word poem. It's a page poem. And what I love about the game is already like, I'm like, right. So this piece works as a spoken word. It works as a letter. It works as a call out. It works as a call in, and it works as like an act of reclamation. It's many things on many levels, which is what we're talking about. Many things on many levels all at the same time. And then yeah, I feel the delight even now. I'm like, right, because I wasn't the hugest Harry Potter fan, but I'm a close reader of fantasy, and I remember all of Harry Potter. And so most of the letter is references to the
Ooh.
Harry Potter series.
Ooh, the fandom is going to do a close reading for sure.
Oh, I hope so. And then the heart of the letter is this like reaching, like, because I am very curious. J.K. Rowling for so many years was not only like best beloved, best selling children's author in the world. We can debate the quality of the books, but you can't debate the intensity of her sales, right, or her popularity at the time. But she was also remains, identified as like pretty leftist, like pro labor, at least nominally anti-racist. She might not have understood all the race issues, but she wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be anti-racist,
Mm-hmm.
um, feminist, very progressive, right? Like she would make statements and her fandom would be like, oh my God, isn't she amazing?
Totally.
Um, and then suddenly around 2020, she like comes out with this, anti-trans stuff. And she phrases it in like the language of justice and feminism still.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a very heartfelt, long statement on her website about why she feels this way. And she's even started to reference the language of her Harry Potter books to like talk about like what she believes to be her oppression, right? As a openly,
Oh.
yeah, like she'll say, she recently said that she felt like trans rights activists were the Death Eaters, who are the villains in the Harry Potter books. And
Yeah.
at the time we were all reading Harry Potter, it's very clear the Death Eaters are like an allegory or an allusion to Nazis, like
Mm-hmm.
to fascists. And somehow her thinking has gone so far in this particular direction that she believes that trans rights activists or trans liberation activists are Nazis and she's oppressed and with from her castle, in England. And this love letter is just like, how did it happen? Where did it go? And I love the sad as I am about the reality, I love the art of reaching for love, um, even in the face of like great harm. And because I know those books so well, like being able to like get into the language of them and like reach for J.K. Rowling's heart, whether or not she ever reads my book, I don't think she will, but to be able to go in that closely, to me, it's like that's the power of poetry.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here, Cheng Thom. To reach for love, even through harm, and when it's hard. I am always amazed by your capacity for compassion. That's
Mm.
very inspiring to me. In my post, healing ages, I feel like, yeah, I can do that. I can do kindness. Just as long as I'm rested, I can do kindness.
Mm.
So, well, we look forward to reading that poem when your book comes out in August.
Thank you.
And for our viewers on the YouTube right now, if you haven't checked out Cheng Thom's performance exclusive for Brickyard, please do. And thank you so much for this conversation, Cheng. It's been really fun.
Oh, Janice, thank you so much. It's been delightful, and I'm so grateful and honored.
Happy Asian Heritage Month.
Happy Asian Heritage Month.